everybody ready to make some paintings today? Okay. Welcome to my studio. My name is Michael Markowsky, and today we are going to be making a painting by one of my favorite artists of all time, the incredible, the one and only Georgia O'Keeffe. Now, she's one of my favorite artists, and today we're making one of my favorite paintings by her, which I think is really, really exciting. Because we don't always necessarily paint my favorite paintings by each and every artist. I try to choose the painting I think is achievable for beginner and intermediate artists. But today's painting I think kind of is going to match up nicely. So all the stars are aligning. So what do I want to show you first? Let's go to this view here. In the video description below, you will see a link to a Dropbox folder. If you click on the Dropbox folder, you will see some files in the Dropbox folder. And those files include this, there's the original image and then a PDF and a JPEG. And this is what they look like. This is the tracing that I did. And then here's the original painting by Georgia O'Keeffe. So what you do is you can print it out onto a regular piece of paper like this, and then we're gonna trace it, transfer it onto a canvas. So sometimes if I'm really, really ahead of the ball, I try to do this before the show begins, but you know, at the moment these days, before the show begins, I wake up our daughter, race out the door, and run her down the street to the nannies, and so probably for the time being, I won't have a chance to do this before the show begins. So let's do this together. I'll show you how I do it. It's pretty straightforward, fairly simple. You get a canvas. You saw me there just sanding it down really quickly. That's because I've pre-gessoed the pre-gessoed canvases. So I just take these canvas boards, and if you want to get the exact one I use, this one is the US Art Supply. Right, they're down there. You can buy them directly from Amazon. They come in like packs of, I think, 20. Was a tape is that I'm looking for. Okay. So I'm just going to take some tape, and so that I can figure out where I want this on the canvas. A little bit. Okay. This one, it doesn't really matter if it's a little bit higher or lower in the corner. I think probably right in the middle is going to work just fine. The canvases I'm painting on are a little bit bigger than an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper. These are 9 by 12 canvases. You can use whichever size you like. I do think that it's easier to paint on larger canvases. So, you know, if you paint on, like, you could paint on a 4 by 5 or 4 by 6 or 3 by 4 or anything quite small, but it makes doing the details really, really tricky. Okay. We'll see how that autofocus works, how well. That's got a new camera running up here, so we'll see how that works today. Not happy so far. Okay, so I put down that carbon paper sheet underneath. If you don't have carbon paper, you can order it, buy it from the link down below, or you can just use a pencil and scribble on the back of this piece of paper, scribble all over it, and then it acts like a piece of carbon paper. And then I'm just going to trace this out really quickly. Again, as I always mention, I like to use a different color just because it's easier to see what you've done and what you haven't done so far. We're going to paint over almost everything on here, so I'm not too concerned about the lines and the quality. You can even see as I'm doing these kind of little jagged areas, I'm going pretty fast. Like I just want to tell myself later on, oh, these are jagged areas versus smooth curves. So, I'm going to try to do this in, you know, maybe 2 or 3 minutes. I was even contemplating today drawing it out just by eye onto the canvas today for the first time in a while. But we've got a lot of painting to do, so, and that does, it takes longer to draw it out, to kind of eyeball it and figure out where things go. In this case, maybe not that much longer, but in some of the earliest videos in my How to Paint series, which is free, it's here on YouTube, and you can watch it at your convenience just by going to my YouTube page. You're already halfway there right now. But a lot of those ones I drew from eye to begin with, because I also deliberately chose fairly simple compositions that people could draw on their own without any extra aids like this. Okay. So, I think I've got everything on there. Moment of reveal. Camera comes back into focus. So there we are. Right, and then I can just peel this right off. And as I've mentioned before, one of the fun things with this kind of thing is you can give this to a kid that you know, and like one of your children or a family friend, and say, hey, look, you want to finish this off? I've already got a little bit of color on there. Why don't you color it in? Anyway, so I'm just going to put this carbon paper back in here. And I don't know if I didn't mention it before, but I've used that same sheet of carbon paper already 3 or 4 times. So you don't just have to use just one per painting. Okay, so let's take a look at the original artwork here. So there's the trace. Oops, there's the tracing. And here, oh, I didn't turn the volume on. Shoot. Sorry, my apologies. Very good. Thank you. There's always something that I forget to do here. One of these days, I'm going to hire myself someone who can just sit there and manage everything behind the scenes, and I can just focus on the painting. But that's if anybody wants to make a very, very large donation via PayPal, there is a link down below, and that would help facilitate that kind of thing. Okay, so I'm going to get my paints out, and as I'm getting them out, I'm just going to sort of think a little bit aloud of how I'm going to approach this painting. So probably the color that I'm going to put down on the canvas first is a cool yellow, right? A cold yellow, which is like this. This is like a lemon yellow. What does Amsterdam call it? Primary yellow. Although, as if you've taken any of these classes before, you probably know that I don't really believe in one yellow and one red and one blue. That we use 2 yellows, 2 reds, 2 blues, and one of them is a cool and one of them is a warm color. So I'm going to paint, I almost can get away with just this color right out of the tube. Let's just kind of look at them side by side here. You know, it's almost, I think actually I'm just going to put this color directly onto the canvas. I don't see... so I'm going to cover this with some yellow. I'm not even going to bother diluting it or anything, or I mean mixing any white or green into it, although there is some green that we will put on there, obviously. Maybe let's put a little bit more. Okay. And then I'm going to grab a little bit larger brush, kind of a medium-sized brush, about the size of my fingernail. You can use a bigger one if you like. The only reason why I don't use like a really, really big one for this kind of step is often so much of the paint just gets into the bristles, and then you've got, you know, half of that paint stays in here and it can't even get onto the canvas. So a smaller brush holds less paint. That means I'm probably going to waste less paint. I'm also just going to mix just a little bit of water in here. That'll just help that paint really seep into any of the little grooves in the paint. So as I go here, once I've got this painted, we'll take a look at Georgia O'Keeffe and who she was, and her, you know, a little bit of her biography and the art that she made. Besides this painting. And you can see I got myself a new cutting mat to go underneath these paintings as I'm painting. And because it's new, I'm just afraid of getting paint on it. You know, it's like, oh, even though it's bound to just get completely filthy by the end of even today's episode, it's just, you know, it's one of those things. It's like today I just got, I haven't even opened the package, some new mop brushes, or blending brushes, in the mail. I haven't, so I'm also just like, oh, using a brush for the first time is like a sacred act. I need to do like a Marie Kondo kind of thing where I sit down and have a conversation with it and see if it's feng shui aligns with. Okay, so I've got my canvas covered. I've put my initial underdrawing down there, and then I've covered it with some yellow. Obviously, the question I get asked all the time is, why even bother doing this? Why not just start painting the colors there? And one of the reasons is it helps seal in the pencil lines, so now I don't have to worry about these pencil lines blurring or smudging and changing. Let's say I'm using white paint. If you use white paint, sometimes you can get, and if you're really scrubbing around, some of that paint is going to mix with the pencil lines, so I don't have to worry about that. It's sealed in for good. The other thing is it's going to create this kind of luminous effect when the other colors are on top. We're going to have this yellow kind of radiating even through the white, when there's predominantly white colors on this painting, and by using that yellow underneath, even those patches of yellow are going to have like some energy kind of coming through the color. Okay, I need to get some rags out here. You know, you can see I use these rags over and over and over again. I just set them aside and let them dry overnight. Sometimes, you know, I've actually put them right on the edge of the garbage and just let them dry there. Just take the extra paint that's on the paintbrush off. Good to see so many familiar people here in the video. That's great. Okay. And I love how you guys are chatting away before the class begins. That makes me super happy. Okay. So, I'm gonna blow dry this and then let it cool down a little bit. And so that's also the great thing of adding a little bit of extra water into the paint on this initial phase. You notice I barely use any water ever besides at this stage of the painting. By putting a little bit of water in there, it dries quickly. Like this is bone dry already, even with just a little blast of air on it. So that is super desirable because I don't want any of this paint mixing into the subsequent layers of paint that I put on top of it. Okay, maybe let's just take a quick little second here to mention that there is, this is the Facebook group. Let me just refresh this. I think this is a few days. Oh. So this is the private Facebook group. You can join. I think it might be the very first link down there below. And you can see all the artwork. Oops, maybe I'm not. Where am I? I'm just looking at. There we are. Or not? I'm not sure. So these are paintings that people have made. Wow, look at that. Great job, May. You can see I haven't gone through here yet and looked at all the new work. Wow. Cool. I'll respond to these a little bit later on. I saw briefly there was a couple brand new people that have joined us and started painting along with me. So let's just take a quick look at this painting. This painting is called An Orchid, 1941, and it's in the collection of the Museum of Modern Art in New York City. And you know what? I didn't even realize until yesterday when I was putting together the class, is that this is actually this is pastel on paper mounted on a canvas board, which surprised me. I had no idea. I thought this was oil on canvas, which she used a lot of oil, but I did not realize she did this with pastel. It doesn't really change how we're going to approach today's class, but I think it's quite impressive that she did it with pastel. So, oops. So here's obviously an image of Georgia Keeffe. She is, or was, while she was alive, one of them, a very, very interesting character. Often described or seen as a proto-feminist or a feminist herself, although she did not appreciate that title. I don't think it wasn't because she was anti-feminist. I just don't think she... Well, we'll get into how people see her work, even to this day, and it offended her greatly. Some of the overly feminine kind of words that are often ascribed to her work, she did not agree with whatsoever. But we'll talk about that as we go here. So she was born 1887 in Wisconsin and died almost 100 years later in Santa Fe, New Mexico. And she spent maybe the last half of her life in New Mexico after her husband Alfred Stieglitz died. Alfred Stieglitz, by the way, was, and to this day, probably well, I'll say he's the most famous photographer. I'm sure there's probably many of you who've never heard of him before, but within photography circles, he's known as like the grandfather or father of photography. He didn't invent photography, but he was responsible for legitimizing photography as an art form in and of itself. And not only was he a photographer, but he also ran an art gallery called 291, I think it was called, in New York City. And that's how he met Georgia O'Keeffe. A friend of Georgia O'Keeffe's took some of her paintings and showed them to Alfred Stieglitz against, or Georgia didn't really know that was happening. Showed it to Alfred Stieglitz, who was amazed and immediately hung and showed some of her work and sold some of her work. And only then did Georgia O'Keeffe realize all of this had happened behind her back. She was furious, but when she got some money for some of the paintings she had made, I think she was like, oh, well, I guess this is not such a bad thing. And of course, Alfred Stieglitz was very well connected into the art world and knew a lot of the most famous artists at the time, Picasso and Matisse, and was exhibiting some of their works. So kind of through him, she got very well connected into to the rest of the art world, but it wasn't through some sort of manipulative behavior on her part. It was all totally kind of spontaneous that this relationship developed, and after they met, they got along, and they subsequently got married, and we'll talk about. He also did a whole series of photographs of her, which caused a whole other controversy, I say. Let me see, what else do I want to mention here? She painted a lot of these abstract paintings. That's, I think, how she kind of came to prominence, is through her abstract art. Those were some of the very first, I think it was her drawings that Stieglitz saw and sold. And then they moved in together in New York when they got married, and she started painting these skyscraper paintings. Is there any of them in here? Let me see here. Let's so here's a bunch of her work on the screen. You can see mostly what we're seeing right now are her flower paintings, which she's most famous for. But let's see, do we have any of her skyscrapers? So here's a bunch of these paintings of skyscrapers in New York City that she painted out the window of their apartment. And I think these are gorgeous paintings. And they're also not too dissimilar from some of Stieglitz's photographs and some of the other photographers in Stieglitz's orbit as well, who were painting these or taking photographs in of architecture in New York in these kind of almost abstract fashions. So she was sort of painting similar sort of images to the photographs of Stieglitz, I guess, in a way. Although, quite frankly, I think her paintings are superior to his photographs. And they're not the same, but there's some similarities. Let me see, anything else I want to share about that? Okay, let's come back up here. And let's just take a look at her New Mexico paintings, because after she moved to New Mexico, she spent some time down in Texas. It wasn't the first time she had been down there, but after Stieglitz died, she had this sort of newfound freedom, I guess you could say, and she moved to New Mexico. She wasn't a big fan of New York, didn't really like being in the kind of bustling city. She liked the big open spaces. And you can see these are gorgeous paintings, and some of which she included like skulls that she found in the desert and in and around her home. And I mean, these are just gorgeous. I would say, like, her images, particularly of the southwest of the United States, have probably done more to shape our idea of the Southwest and southern United States more than country music or any. I mean, I can't even think of any, like, her. These images, which she created in like the 40s and 50s, 60s, or no, it would have been like 60s and 70s when she was making these, really, cemented in the public imagination what the landscape looked like, the atmosphere, the big open land and the skies. Anyway, just a hugely influential artist in that area. Okay, so let's move forward here. I'm just looking at some of the comments. Oh, so some people are having problems with the internet. I know that there's no problems on my side, and it doesn't look like there's... might be, let me see. Some people are having... We've got brand new, super high-speed internet, so I might be, if anything, I might be broadcasting at too high of a resolution. Let me just see if there's... Just going to lower this down here just a bit. If that's causing people to have some difficulty. Come on. Oops. Okay. Hopefully everything's okay. Okay, 1 second here. That's somewhat concerning. Where's my... Sorry, maybe I should have just ignored all this, but... Okay, computer, why are you being so... There we go. Okay, maybe while that's thinking, I'm going to start making I'm not sure. Anyway, so did I lose all that? Ah, okay. Rebuild that. Okay, I'm going to start putting some paint on my canvas. I can't switch my views or anything right now because of this problem. So I'm just going to put some paint out onto the canvas. And we'll see how that thing recovers. I guess I don't really need to put much red on this on my palette, but I'll put a little bit anyway. go, come on. Remember I was saying it'd be nice to have somebody doing all this stuff in the background, so when problems arise, I can just focus on what I'm doing here. Okay, it looks like now everything is back up to normal here. Just needed some time to do its own little thinking. Okay, so let's take a look at this now. So what I want to do now is I'm going to paint some of the green that's inside here, and then I'm going to build out towards the white. So let's take a look at the canvas here. So the white is what I'm going to paint a little bit of that last, but let's do this green that's in some of these background areas here. So that green is primarily going to be my cool yellow and my cool blue. Now, I know some of you are saying, well, what about this whole warm and cool thing that we've been doing so far? We've been trying to put the cool colors in the background and warm colors in the foreground. Well, this painting there's not really a lot of depth to it, right? It's not like there's, you know, mountains and sky in the background. We pretty much have the flower fills up the entire screen. So there's, or the paint canvas. So there's not really, we don't really need to worry so much about creating a lot of depth in the picture. And so I'm just going to use pretty much cool colors for this painting. So that's why I'm going to use a cool yellow and cool blue for this. Oops. Okay, let's see. How's that? So that took about a good 10 minutes of confusion in the middle of the video. So let me kind of get centered, have my sip of tea here. Okay. So get some other brushes out. I'm going to get maybe a little bit of a smaller brush for this. And I'm going to use some of these medium-sized brushes as like blending brushes. And I have been using this one. I'm just going to throw it out. Keep on using it, and it sheds, and little hairs are falling out of it, and it is more trouble than it's worth. And so I'm going to use, I've got this mop brush, although I did just get these in the mail from Amazon. And we'll see how well they work, and if they work really well, then I'll recommend that you get them. So here's a few of these brushes here. So this is the one I had previously. These are all about seem to be shedding a little bit, so that made me concerned. Brand new brush, it's already shedding. This doesn't look, yeah, it's already falling apart. This one I might return. That does not bode well when you first get it out of the package and hairs start coming out. Let's see. I'll try it. And so anyway, these brushes, the reason why I have these brushes, I'm going to use them for blending. So if I get paint down, I can use it dry and kind of blend some of the paint out to get these kind of smooth effects that are kind of a trademark of George O'Keeffe's paintings. Now you can see there's different sizes. Personally, I prefer a little bit of a smaller size. These larger ones are going to work great, but they might be a little bit big. They would work really well for like your Bob Ross size paintings, you know, large painting, really nice big brush. But if you're trying to do smaller details, they can be actually a little bit problematic. So I'm going to use this one. This is great. I'm actually quite happy with this. This is the Princeton brand, which I think some of these, my green brushes here are Princeton as well. So I'll put a link to it after, but this is a mop brush, and this is a 1/2 inch mop brush. Okay. So let's mix some paint here, and let's bring this view up. Okay. So to get started, we're going to use some slow dry medium. I'm going to mix some of that paint in here. So let's take a little bit of the cool blue. I'll just put that to the side. And I'm going to mix paint into that color here. Right, you can see it's pretty much exactly like the color in the painting. Right, very few colors required for this particular artwork. Okay. So I'm going to put some slow dry medium in here. And right now, that's quite a lot. So what that's going to end up doing, it's going to make this color a little bit more transparent. Not too transparent, but a little bit. And it's going to be, because it's going to take a little bit longer to dry, it'll give me the option to do a little bit of blending with that brush, or that paint. Okay. Now, I'm going sort of, I will go a little bit darker on a subsequent layer, but kind of going halfway will give me a little bit more room to make any kind of potential mistakes, I guess you could say. So we'll get my mop brush out and a smaller brush. It's always good to sort of have your tools already set up, so when you do any of this kind of blending, you're already ready to go. So to do that, I'm going to use a few of these smaller brushes. We're going to paint that green in, and then we're going to blend it out here. So, which one? Let's use this one to start. How about, why don't we start off on, the sides. We'll do some of these, and then we'll kind of build up some of our confidence so we attack the center of the canvas, okay? So let's just paint a little bit of this in. Now you could do this without a blending brush, as well, right? We can just take this and slowly, as the paint comes off of the brush, we can kind of blend it out like that. Autofocus. Okay. Right, so I can apply that like that, and then I can take this brush and just kind of going over here, just gently smoothing that out. Right, and then afterwards I kind of rub it on a towel or something just to kind of get that excess paint off. Right, and we can build that up later. I'm going to let that dry. Let's try this again over here. So I'm just going to paint this in here. You notice I'm not concerned with the way that these, going over any of these other colors or the pencil lines. Okay, and take this brush again. Just sort of softly kind of smooth it out. Alright, looks good. So it's like kind of like scrubbing it out a little bit, right? So let's continue here. Where's another area here? Why don't we go right down to the bottom down there? So it's these kind of nice, smooth transitions. There's a few areas here where I'm not super happy with. Maybe, let's see if I can, because it's still drying. We've got the slow dry medium. We can get a little bit more, it still blend a little bit even after it's been applied to the canvas for a little bit. Okay, so I'm just going to come up into the flower a little bit now. Let's just blend a little bit of this in here. So one of the advantages, so I put a lot of slow dry medium into this paint, probably almost 2 to 1. And that makes the color a lot more transparent. It's almost like we're making a glaze, right? In fact, it's basically like glazing at this point. And what that allows me to do, especially if, you know, I'm a little bit more timid as a painter, is I can do many, many layers of glazing like this, right? So you can see some of these colors right now are pretty subtle, right? So this, if I put less medium in, and let's say I had a much darker, you know, almost use that blue in there, trying to make a transition from the darker color to the lighter color in one blending pass would be much more challenging, and it may not have, you may not get the results you like. So this is for somebody who might be a little bit more scared of making a so-called mistake. If you put a little bit more of the blending medium or slow dry medium in there, the chances, it's safer, right? It's harder to make a mistake. And if you do make a mistake, you can more easily sort of turn things around, I guess. Or if things turned out really poorly, you can just wipe it right away, which you've seen me do in previous episodes where I painted something, I didn't like it, and I just literally take my paper towel and just wipe it right off. So I'm actually just let's just paint this shape right here. Okay, let's do the same thing. Just the whole point is just sort of blending those edges out and taking the hard edges away, right? Now it's not perfect, but I'm just going to leave that there, because if I keep on fiddling with it, it's going to I'm going to start scrubbing paint away. So let's just continue this here. Notice I'm just sort of going to the edge where I'm trying to blend it out. I'm not sort of worried about the darker areas. I can leave that nice and dark. Just like that, right? Now, some of these pencil lines are going to end up kind of showing through a little bit. Don't worry about it. It's okay. It's okay if they're there. If you wanted to do this again a second time, now that you kind of are starting to know, you could think of this as maybe your practice painting. Then you could do this again, or you could create a whole different painting inspired by her painting of a different flower. Okay. Let me see. Some of this here is actually transitions between white, or actually gray, and the yellow. But I'm going to put a little bit of green in here anyway. Just so that there's a little bit of green in some of these darker shadowy areas. Maybe this gets covered up later on. If it gets mostly covered up, but a little bit of that shines through, that'll actually be kind of cool. So I think I need to put more in this area here, right? Okay, maybe a little bit more down here, I guess. Just going to build this up a little bit more. Okay, and actually I notice up here, I think I want to do a little bit more of that up there as well. Even though this is going to be covered with, I think, some white afterwards. And I can see that the slow dry medium is slowly drying, and it's starting to get a little bit tacky, which isn't surprising. It slows the drying process down, but it doesn't stop it, right? So if we were trying to paint this with just regular acrylic paint, just right out of the tube, it would be very hard to get some of to blend it like this. Maybe just a few little air. I'm going to put a little bit of this green maybe in a few other places. Again, maybe some of this gets hidden. Where else can I put it? We'll put some down here. I think that might be good for this initial pass. So I'll show you what we'll do next. Just want to make sure that I'm going to take some paint off of this. All right, it's a little bit crusty as that's starting to dry a bit, right? So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to clean my mop brush. All right, I want to get some of that paint that's off there. This is, you know, Bob Ross beating the devil out of the brush, off the bristles, right? And he's got his can, bang, 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 bang. That's what he's doing, right? The difference, though, with Bob Ross is painting with oil paint, and you use like turpentine or OMS, odorless mineral spirits, to clean your brushes, and that material evaporates quite quickly, right? Which is why it can be, if you're in an enclosed room, you can get a little bit lightheaded, right? Obviously, if we're not using those, we're using water, which takes a little bit longer to evaporate. I'm kind of trying to speed that up by brushing it on my hand a little bit, sort of the same sort of way if you're using a hair dryer, right? You need to kind of move it around, right? If you just sort of blast the hair dryer at it, it doesn't do as well as when you're moving. Anyway, so I will. Speaking of hair dryers, I'm gonna dry this layer of paint here. Okay. So the reason why I use the hair dryer is I want to dry this initial layer of green, because I'm going to go back over it with another coat. And I'm probably not even going to change the mixture, right? I've got this mixture that I used. I'm going to use, maybe I might add a little bit more blue to it. Let's just let's take a little bit more blue and we'll mix, so we'll get a little bit darker here. Just a little bit darker. You see how, like, when I grab more paint, I kind of put it off to the side and then I mix that color in so that I'm not taking it, putting directly in there, because if it's too dark, then it's too dark, right? Just adding a little bit more yellow so that I still have more paint. Okay, that's good. We got a lot of, not too much paint. We're not going to use too much of it, so let's put a little bit of slow dry medium, maybe just a tad bit more. Let's just mix this in. So again, this is going to be a little bit more on the transparent side. Well, not totally transparent, but just a little bit, which also just going to make our lives a little bit easier, because we're not trying to blend a dark opaque color into yellow, right? We're blending something that's slightly transparent, which just makes the whole process go a little bit easier. Okay. So now I've got this color, which is noticeably a little bit darker, right? So let's take a look at the painting and see where our darker areas are. So maybe let's do the same thing. Let's start in an area that was maybe a little bit off center, so that we can build up some confidence. That might have been even too much. I didn't need to put so much paint up there. See how I'm kind of just making like little circles? I'm just barely kind of touching into that line and kind of just scrubbing it out a little bit. If you get kind of little ridges, you know, you can just blend it right out, and then you can add more later, right? The one thing I would say is you want to be careful doing what I just did, because, yeah, you can see right there, some of it is already starting to dry a little bit because I'm making it quite thin. Right, so I'm just going to leave that there, and I'll fix that later when it's dry. Okay, so let's do the center here. All right, this dark area right here. Hair coming off of that brush, I think. Okay, let's just put a bunch more in here. I think I need a little more of the slow dry medium in there. I think part of what happened is some of the paint that was in my brush that was starting to dry up was already kind of dry, so I was getting some dry spots on there. Okay, let's do this. Maybe let's try this area here now. There we go. Okay. You see it's starting to kind of dry up a little bit, and as I paint over top some of these marks, I'm kind of scrubbing it away. So I'm going to just have to let this dry and touch that up later on. It's okay because it's got to get darker there anyway. So we'll just keep moving towards a different part of the picture. I don't even think I need to blend that. That turned out pretty nice just on its own. Okay. I mean, you could really get away without any blending brush whatsoever. Here, I don't think... I guess I'm kind of a little excited to try those tools since I just arrived. Oops. Okay. Okay, we'll just do one more little bit. Oh, I guess there's inside the flower there. Okay. There's a little bit, some subtle areas there that I think I might just leave alone. I can always do more of this later on, obviously, right? Now, I think I'm going to come down underneath here and add some... I think I'm just going to add white right into this color. So, just move the canvas out of the way. So... where's my white? Okay. Let's see if I add white to this color, what kind of color we get. So you see, if we add white to the color, we're going to get a much lighter green. And then so we can look around. Do we want any of this sort of frosty green color? I don't think so. I think what I want is a little bit, well, what if we add more blue to this? Yeah, that's what we want right there. So we're going to put this color under the flower towards the very bottom of the painting there. Okay. So let's use some more slow dry medium. Little drops there. We'll stir it up. So this will be my initial layer, and then I think I'm going to get darker afterwards. So let's add some paint on this brush. Just get a little more blue in here. Okay. We'll trade places with the painting. And as I said, we're going to put this down under here. It might be a little bit darker than I was hoping it would be. I'm going to take my mop brush, just soften these edges a bit here. So that's, I'm not happy with this hard line there. I want it to be a little bit wider. So let's just... Okay, that's not too bad for our initial pass. A few little areas it could be better, but that's okay. Let's do the same up here. Again, we're going to do this a second time, so it doesn't all have to work in the first pass. So this is much darker. I should have added a lot more slow dry medium, but that's okay. interesting. It looks, I have two monitors here I'm looking at, and this color looks very different on both of them. So, okay. Again, looking, do I need this color anywhere else? I don't think so. I'm going to blast it with some air, and then we're going to do this again. Now that I'm looking at this painting a little bit more, I'm realizing a lot of this might be all white down here and less yellow. Okay, just sort of taking another look at the painting, because the painting has all the clues in it, right? So I think what I'm going to do now is I want to get a bunch of white into these areas, and then I'm going to start darkening them. So, clean my brush here. Be on its last legs. So, and this brush too, let's clean our blending brush. Okay, so oh, this needs to be clean too. It's interesting, like a painting like this, there's a lot of people watching and no one's commenting, everyone's painting. As I said, it reminds me of like Thanksgiving dinner where everyone is eating and there's no talking because everyone's focused on painting. Okay, so again, so I'm debating in my mind, just because the very, very last thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to paint white, and or it'll actually be probably some, depending on what it is, probably darker grays and blending them in on top of the flower. So that's going to be the very, very last things that I do. But right now, I think what I'm going to do is paint white, like large blocks of white, and then we're going to blend colors or some purples into that white. Okay. So I need some more white on here. And I'm going to put it right here because I'm eventually going to be blending these two colors together. So I'm going to take this size brush here. And let's just start. And you know what? I'm going to add a little bit of slow dry medium to it as well. It's going to make it like 10% more transparent. But if I make any mistakes at any point, I can wipe it away fearlessly. Okay. So let's say paint this white. We'll go into this big area first. I don't have to be super precise as I do this, but you know, it's easier. The as you progress, I guess the better of a job you do at every stage of the process, the easier it makes your life towards the end of the process, right? So here's just that part of it kind of bends and turns. I'll get that. Okay. So again, I can imagine some people saying, maybe I should have just painted this area, a few things here yellow, and left this white. My answer would be yes, but there is now this radiating yellow coming through. It's almost invisible, and it doesn't really turn up on camera very well, but there is yellow there that is coming through that and just giving even that area a little bit of vibrancy. Okay. What should we do next? How about let's paint this area white here. And you know what, what's kind of interesting too is that it almost gets a little bit gray because there's a bit of that yellow in behind, and it's sort of dulling that white out a little bit and taking some of the brightness of the white away, which I kind of like. Okay. What's next here? Let's go over here. Let's just go right up to the flower. I'm going to paint this whole area in here. Yeah, let's just go right down to the bottom. I think, right? Yep. And you can see I could care less about going a little bit over top of my pencil lines. In fact, what's kind of nice about that is I'm hiding a little bit of those pencil lines with this white, right? So a little mistake or anything here, just wipe it away. Okay. Now, remember I was just spent a little bit of time fiddling down here. My question to myself is, Should I just cover that up or blend it in? So we can try both. We can cover part of it up and we'll try to blend it. So I just took a little bit more white and put a little bit more of the slow dry medium in here. So we'll get this nice and covered on the bottom. You could, if you want, you could just paint this whole area out. I may end up doing that. We'll see here in just a couple seconds how it turns out. But let's say if we want to try to blend these together, if we can, how that would actually look. Not bad. And what's kind of nice about this is I'm just sort of blending the white, right? So I'm not worried about getting any of that darker color mixing into the rest of the white. It's kind of nice. It kind of works, doesn't it? Now, I'm probably going to go back over top of it. We'll see as it goes. But I don't know. I kind of like that. Kind of works, doesn't it? Okay. Okay, now. I should just leave that alone. So I'm scraping some of that paint off. Okay, so let's blow dry that. So I just see in the comments there, Lori says, I just can't seem to get this blending technique. So maybe before I we're gonna do more of it here. So I'll explain again, nice and slowly. But just out of curiosity, Lori, is it? Do you have any slow dry medium or some glazing fluid that you're using? Or here's glazing liquid you could use instead of the slow dry medium. So just maybe while I finish blow drying this, maybe let me know if you have that, because if you're trying to use just water to do the blending, you just have the paint and water, it makes this pretty difficult. Absolutely, absolutely. That would be it would be kind of frustrating. Okay, so I see Lori responded. I have both. I've tried both. I have both, and I've tried both. The glazing liquid and the slow dry medium. It seems to. I seem to have better luck blending wet into wet, and I just tried that. So wet into wet. I'm assuming what you mean is when you have maybe a little bit thicker paint. We're applying thicker paint, and then we can blend wet paint into wet, which is. We did a lot of that in the most recent Paint the News episode we did on Thursday, where we painted the painting of Alyssa Carson, the astronaut, and which is a great painting. I really enjoyed doing that. That was, I think, one of the most successful ones we've done so far. But we did a lot of wet into wet painting. So I think I did use some slow dry medium, but for the most part, I was applying the paint a little bit thicker, and then painting wet paint on top of other wet paint to blend colors, and that can work just as well, right? And I'll actually be doing a little bit of that as I get closer towards the center of the composition. Okay. So, where should we start now? Is this all dry? It's a little bit tacky there. Nuts moving around so much. Okay. So, still a little bit wet. So I'm a little bit leery about starting to blend anything on top of these wet areas. And this is the slow dry medium, so it slowed the drying process down. But if I start trying to paint on paint that is not completely dry, then I'm going to start scrubbing that paint away, and it's going to look horrible. It'll make it, and I'm going to lose my mind. So, while that's drying, let me see if there's another area of the canvas I can work on. So, do I want to try doing? I'm going to save everything in here. This is going to be the very, very last stuff that I do. All of these things here, that's going to be the last stuff. So I'm looking into this area here. Maybe I can do a bit of blending into there. Although, you know what? I want to do this dark area there first. Down here, this is kind of dry. Can I do that? Still very tacky. Do I want to touch that up? Okay, I think I'm just going to continue forward, even though this is still, as I was saying, like it's tacky in that, if dust particles landed on here, they might get stuck into the paint. It's not, no paint is coming off on my fingers, but I can hear, you can hear it kind of, sticking, versus other areas, right, that doesn't have that, I hear where it's just kind of pulling at my skin just where the dry areas don't. Right? So, I think it might be okay. I think I might be able to get away with it. I just put a lot of slow dry medium into that white. So, maybe while that's, what we can do is we can start mixing some of this darker, kind of a purple color. So to do that, I'm going to take my cool red. In fact, I'm going to mix it right here. So we're going to mix a purple, and I might use a bunch of it. So I'm going to mix a little, not too much, but just a little bit over here. So I take the cool red and the warm blue. If I mix those two together, I'm going to get my best purple. Okay, so I get a nice, I think we'll make a little bit. Yeah, we don't need too much, but, and we're going to dilute this significantly because in the painting itself, you're like, oh, where's the purple? What are we talking about purple? Well, she's using purple for the shadows. There's no black whatsoever in this painting, right? Even in the shadows, I mean, you could cheat and use a little bit of gray or black to make a gray, but I think we can do this all with just the colors so we can have a nice vibrant painting. So I can take this here, and now let's mix it in with some white. And then you look at this color and you say, well, that's very pink. Okay, well, let's make it a little bit more blue. Let's warm it up because it was kind of a cool purple. Let's make it a warm purple. We can warm it up, oddly enough, by adding some of the warm blue, because we had the cool red, right, that was moving towards the blue, making it a cool color, versus the warm blue, which is actually moving towards the red. Okay. So that color is still really, really bright, right? Like it's still, there's a lot of white, or it's still maybe too dark even, really, for this painting. Let's add a more blue to it. I think what I'm going to end up doing, I'm going to mix this. I may use a little bit of this sparingly, this darker color. We'll see here. That looks pretty good. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to put this. I'm going to actually put this brush into the water. Here's my mop brush. It's been sitting there soaking while I've been painting away. The thing with your blending brush is you want it to be dry, not wet. If it's really wet, then it's not going to serve its purpose. It's going to be scrubbing paint away rather than blending paint, right? The wet, remember, we clean our acrylic brushes, we clean our brushes that have acrylic paint off with water. So anytime we're using water, we run the risk of cleaning the paint off of the canvas, right? The paintbrush and the paint doesn't know what you want it to do. It's just like, oh, I guess we're in the cleaning phase right now. Oh, we must be close to being done. Okay, let's start. And you're like, no, I'm trying to blend the paint. What are you doing, paintbrush? Okay. Oops, I should have. I usually, a good habit to do is to wipe the paint off before you put it into the water so that it's much easier to clean that brush, which I just neglected to do. So I'm going to need to get a new painting shirt here soon. Some of these getting a little crusty, all that paint blend up there. Okay, so I've got this darker color and our white. So let's get some white onto our brush. And let's just kind of sneak a little bit of that paint away. Right, so we've got this bit of a darker color. It's a white, but not a too dark of a white. It's pretty subtle. And you want to be, you don't need to push it too far to get the effect you want with this. Right, so we got that. Slow dry medium. blend that together. Let's get just a little bit more. Darken just a little bit more. Okay, so let's take a look at our picture again. I'm going to take this color and let's try putting it into some of these corners here. Again, it's pretty subtle. Oops, I just sort of painted part of the that little thing that was coming out there. I painted that out. If I want, I can bring it back later. Right, so that's super subtle. So I'm probably going to have to do another layer of darker paint in the corners. In fact, right, let's just wipe. Oh, it was right there. That's where it was. I don't know how well that comes across on camera, but there's a nice subtle kind of transition here. So it does get kind of darker going into those corners. And I'm going to use a little bit more slow dry medium in there. Oops. Okay. And I think, let's just, for the sake of time, I'm going to go make it a little bit darker. In fact, let's take a bit of that. What I just did was maybe for the little bit more timid folks out there, and you could build up many, many layers of very subtle color. Now I want to try to get this painting done a little bit faster, so I'm going to go much darker here. Okay. So you see how it kind of went on pretty dark, and then as I kind of spread it around, it loses, you know, it's sort of being diluted, so it loses it's the darkness that I once had a little bit. And if in doubt, over blend it and then do it, wait for it to dry and do it again later. Okay, where else should we tackle this same color? Let's do up here. I'm just going to do this whole thing, this color here. Just I'm going to simplify the picture a little bit. So I'm not going to really do much blending up here at all. Keep that a little bit on the darker end. But down here we will. So I keep on making the rookie mistake of painting and not getting the result I want, and then being really impatient and trying to paint over top of it again. I think I'm just going to let that dry. And let me think here. Let's paint this darker color. See how I just went right over top of this? Because I'm going to paint white over there anyway. So it doesn't bother me if it's a little bit darker there. What else? Okay, I think that's okay. Again, I'm going to blow dry that, and then I'm going to fix this area down there. So I think some of this is still going to be a little bit wet. So I think what I'm going to do is come down into this area and start painting onto the flower itself. Like you see some of these colors down here. They're similar to the kind of purple colors we have. If you're thinking like, oh, you know what? These look too reddish purple. If you want it to go darker, we can add a little bit of the cool blue to the same mixture, and it's going to go instantly a little bit gray, which we are going to do in a short bit here. But I actually kind of like that little purple flare in there, a little bit more purple, but okay, so to do this down here, I'm gonna use a little bit more slow dry medium. Okay. And I'm going to use some of my smallest brushes. Okay, so let's come down into here. And I'm going to do a few things here. One of which is, as you know, I paint a little bit, and then I'm going to try to blend it out into the flower. And then I'm going to add these kind of pointy, wispy kind of things. And some of these, I'm going to go back over and make them brighter or darker as needed. So here there's some white stuff that's going to be in there later. I'm still going to paint it a little bit darker just right now. Just blend things in. I'm going to have to make a few kind of I'm gonna remove a bunch of detail as I do this, just so that we can get this done in a reasonable amount of time. Right, so I make that brush stroke. Any of this stuff that comes into the yellow here, right? In fact, I could just do this kind of thing. Paint around like that, and then just soften it right now. Because if I do all of this detail and then try to blend that color out, this paint will all be dry, and I'm going to get some hard lines there. So now I don't have to worry about that. I can kind of paint at my leisure down here. And again, if this is a little bit too, if you don't like the level of contrast and you want it darker, that's okay. But what I would do is I would still paint this out first, and then come back later with a slightly darker color and repeat this process, which, you know, I'll probably do that down here as well. So just, you know, I don't want to get too far ahead of myself at this point yet. And you never know, you may end up just liking it as it is. Alright, there's a lot more detail in here. As I said, I'm kind of having to remove a little bit. This area looks like it's almost entirely kind of darker anyway. So I'm just going to paint that in. So I think this is where it kind of gets kind of fun. We've laid in a lot of the most important big areas of color, and now we can start refining things and adding these little wisps. Okay. And, you know, there's like some white, and there's gradations of darkness in here. We'll get all that. We'll get all that. Don't worry. I just want to. It takes a few. We're gonna kind of go all the way around, and we'll kind of come back and we'll hit all those details as we get there. Let's see. Let's do that same kind of thing right here. And then let's, I think shortly I'm going to mix a slightly darker color. But we'll see, where else can I use this color? I'm looking around, do I want anything here? I can use this same up here. Okay. Okay. So you can see that what's kind of nice is we have the same color that's up here. Well, I guess this one was a little bit lighter, but the same color up here, and then we're putting, so we've got the darker color here, and then we're bringing that same color back in on these wisps, right? So that's the fun thing with having kind of blending like this, is we can create those changes. Just two colors. And if I want, I can darken, yeah, I'll probably darken some of these in selective places. And obviously I'm just moving quickly through here, not really getting many of the same level of detail, but that's just the... That's up to you guys at home whether you want to spend an extra few hours really diving into some of that detail. How about let's do some of this in here. careful getting my hand in some of this wet paint down here. So. Some of these I think I'm going to end up using a much darker color, I think. Or at least I'm going to wait for some of that to dry. Let's do this here. Okay, that is pretty good so far. Deborah says, it's not going well for me right now, so I'll tackle this tomorrow. Good night to everyone now. We were out hiking today and I'm exhausted. Thanks, Michael. See everyone Thursday. I totally, yeah, it can be a little exhausting when making a painting for sure sometimes. Sometimes I find I get a little bit of eye strain doing some of the finer details. Okay. I'm just going to clean these brushes a little bit. My mop brush, you can see, is getting pretty cloudy, and my fine detail one is as well. Feel pretty good about where we are right now. You know, we're painting for about an hour and a half, and you know, I'd say we're gonna maybe another hour, I would say at most here, depending on how much time you want to spend in here. So next thing, oh, you know what? Is this? That's still. I'm gonna blow dry it because I want to get that a little bit darker, but maybe I'll just use a darker, different color for that. Okay, so right now I'm just kind of coming up with my game plan of where I want to tackle and what I want to do next here. So, I think the next things I'm going to do is I'm going to mix a darker, I'm going to add, well, why don't we just do this? So we've got the color we've just been painting with, right? And so that was, remember again, a warm blue and the cool red together, and we got a purple, right? That was the initial mix. Here we added some white to it, and then here we just added more white to it. So pretty subtle color, right? If we put that bright one down or that dark one down, it just wouldn't match with anything in there. So if we want to get a little bit more of a gray, we're saying like, nah, it's a little too purple, Michael. How do I get more gray? Well, what I can do is add some of the cool blue into this mixture. And what that's going to do is it kind of neutralizes the other, so it is further pulling this color in towards the neutral core. All right, so let's do this again. So now we've got a right now it's fairly, like, that looks like a gray to me, or it's a purple, it's a blue gray, but it's gray, right? It's because we've basically simulated when all these colors converge into the neutral core, they become gray. All right, so that's actually quite a nice gray. It's very subtle. It's you know, if I put this over top, you can see how it's a little bit different. Now it's a bit more of a blue. And this might have been a more desirable color for people to begin with anyway, but okay, a little more slow dry medium in here. I'm actually going to draw a little more blue in there just for the sake of time. See how I mix a little bit and then pull a little bit more color into my brush. See, now it's much darker. Okay. So where do we want to put this color? This little bit darker blue. I think I'm going to put it right. Let's start up into this area. See the difference? I do have to remember none of this is dry, so I'm just going to put some right here. And I'm going to use my blending brush. I'm just going to dry it, make sure it's as dry as I can get it in this short amount of time. That's why it's nice to have maybe a couple of these blending brushes. I need a little bit more. Let's just put... Okay. I'm going to do some of these wisps up here fairly quickly because I'm going to darken that in a minute, but as I'm going to pass over it again, so I don't need to do too much detail. What I do want to do is blend this down into here. I'm really for this part, I'm more worried about this area and not this, the tips of the flower. Some of this is actually going to be white, and it's going to be a little bit darker. There's a bit of this color here. Same thing here. So some of these little details, I'm kind of moving pretty quickly through them because just for the sake of time. I'm going to paint this. It's going to be a little bit darker under here. might be good for this pass of this color here. Okay. Getting there, folks. Slowly but surely, we're getting there, getting closer than it may feel at this exact moment. So just hold on, we're getting there, piece by piece. I think we can use this same color up here. Just laid a big bunch of color in fact. Yeah. And then let's see if we can soften that edge a little bit. Okay, what should we do next? I may just leave that, or at least for now. Okay. So, what do I want to do? I probably should have put darker color down under here first. That would have been smart. In fact, maybe I can do that. Let's see. Why not? Let's try to add a little bit of blue to this. So I'm adding, I got both blues in the mix. Pretty dark color. I know it's not exactly the color she used there. I'm going to take a bit of the cool red. Put some slow dry medium into that. And use a little bit medium-sized brush here. And I'm going to go in here and just darken underneath here. In fact, I'm going to add a little bit more blue, darken that even more. because I'm going to play around with that edge there. It needs to be a little bit darker. Okay. So maybe while I've got this same darker color here, I can look around and think, is there any place else that needs a little bit more help getting dark? Well, maybe... Where did my little paintbrush go? There you are. Okay. As I'm doing these wisps, it kind of reminds me a little bit of Hokusai's, the Great Wave painting that we did back in December. And trying to get these wisps and making them look kind of believable. Part of that is making sure they look kind of random. They're not all going in the same direction. See, I put that paint down, and then I kind of blend it out, and then I go back over top to bring any sharp details back in. And now I can kind of selectively add. Now these, I think, could be much darker down here, but again, I just may not have time to do all of it, so I'm just going to get a little bit extra darkness to some of these here. Moving along here. I guess that should be maybe brighter. This could be darker under here. So let's darken this. So I just kind of soften it out, and then I can go back, darken areas a little bit. Else can I apply? Just soften that up just gently. Remember where things are wet and dry and all that kind of thing. Okay. I was about to say to myself, wow, I'm amazed I haven't got any paint on my wrist and applied it down here elsewhere. And then it's like, you know what, Michael? Don't speak too soon. Don't even, but, you know. So I shouldn't say that, but I'm saying it just so for, because I'm sure it's probably happening to a few of you down the, you know, as you're painting on your paintings as well. Now that's white. Maybe I'll leave that. Do I like... Let's do this up here. I know this is not exactly like the original, but... Okay, looking, scanning. Let's do... This will eventually be white on here, so I'm just going to darken under here. Okay, starting to kind of come together, eh? I guess this I could darken some of this under here. I just am kind of just being mindful of time, thinking, what is, if I had to kind of finish in the next half hour, what, you know, I can live with some of that down there. This stuff up here I need to take care of, however, a little bit sooner than later, so... Putting little dabs of a little bit darker areas. Just being quite subtle. Okay. There are little specks of things that are, you know, from, I don't know, brushes or I don't know what, kind of falling onto the canvas. So I always get the impulse to want to brush them away with my finger. And I always have to tell myself, hey, just wait for it to dry when it's safe to touch that canvas, Michael. Yikes. Because once it's dry, you can pull that paint right off and it's no problem. If you try to do it while it's wet, then you risk smudging things. So, just sort of looking at some of those comments here as I clean up some brushes before I move on. I see Lori. Heidi says, my brush is too hard. It scratches. Well, everything is wet for me. I'm just watching. Yeah, that's, I mean, if you're using it, the kind of ideal blending brush is a very soft brush, right? You can use, like, makeup brushes work really well. I've used those in the past. Obviously, they're not intended to have paint on them, so one thing I've noticed with like a makeup brush is sometimes that they can kind of get chunky pretty quickly. So you might have to be washing your brush more often, a makeup brush. But they work pretty well because they're usually pretty fluffy and soft because you're brushing them on your face, right? What else? Lori says, I'm watching now too. I should have watched more earlier. Laugh out loud. I didn't have enough paint on either. If the paint is too wet, can you wait a while for it to dry a bit and then blend? Yeah, yes and no. It's sort of, again, it depends if there's slow dry medium in the paint. Because, you know, you can have a big blob of paint, but this top surface is going to start to dry, and then you can, it's like, you know, a skin on the surface of milk or something, right? So generally it's easier to blend thicker paints, you know, like let's say, again, if I apply this big brush stroke of paint on here, I'll be able, and it didn't have any slow dry, I mean, I could blend that pretty well, you know, while it's still wet. I always think, however, the best thing to do is, if you want, like, you saw me as I was doing these wisps, right? My primary, the first thing I do is I put the paint down, and before I start doing all these little wisps, I blend it out so that it's not, because if I wait and I do all those things and then I come back, they're going to have dried, right? And I don't want those ridges, really. Okay. So, what should I do next? I think I'm going to kind of switch and go to the opposite here and now start using some white. So, let's just move a few things out of the way. I think this color, do I need that? I'm going to clean that brush off, or just put it in the water to soak for a bit. Okay, so I do have some white here. Let me see if I can be careful to try to get it without getting any paint, other colors on it. That looks good. And my slow dry medium to show you here. So I got my white here, mix it in with the slow dry medium. Okay. Let's look at the painting and where we need to apply white. Okay. So there's probably some selective area. In fact, you know what I should have... Is this... Actually, it looks pretty dry. Okay, I think I can get away with some of this here. So let's do some... I know this is going to be a little bit different than her painting. Again, I'm going to have to kind of riff a little bit so that I can get the painting done in a reasonable time. Alright, so you see how I kind of I get a little bit of paint on, and then I can, even with my brush, I can kind of just blend it out a bit. I mean, I can use this to help a little bit, but let's bring that down a little bit more white into here. I guess there was a bit of a curve. Let's get that curve here. Let's see, there's another one here. Earlier I painted this darker. I'm going to paint this back white, but depending on how much slow dry medium you put in here, you may need to go over some of these. We'll see how it dries. Some of those whips might need a little bit more light later on. Okay, there's a bit of white down in here. Alright, I just used my thumb and just brushed that away because I didn't like the marks I made. I'm not too happy with them, but I'm just gonna, let's see, I'm gonna curve that up there. Highlight on the side of the flower. There's a little speckle of white shining through here. This area here is white, right? Okay. You know what? yeah, I think she goes... there like that. Let's just soften that edge a bit. Okay. That's interesting. There's some white down here. You can see my paint, that white is starting to get a little bit tacky, and I'm losing some of the, not blending as well, but blend it out as much as I can anyway. That was a little tricky down there. Okay, sometimes I get just so obsessed with the little details. I have to remember to keep moving forward here. So. Supposed to be little whiffs, but they didn't turn out very well. So let's try that again. I got my white in. I'm happy with the white. I just need to... There we go. Okay, a lot of this is turning out pretty well. I think what I'm going to do now is I am going to, what am I going to do just right now? I'm scanning the picture, looking for things that need to be changed. I think I want to put this darker color up here. I didn't get a chance to do that because it was still really wet. So, I'm going to get it. Yikes. Oh, that's very dry. Lots of slow dry medium into that color, which had dried a bit. So let's see if we can bring it back to life. Okay. Put this into these corners and right up here. going to try to help it a little bit by just doing a pre-blend a bit, I guess. Pulling some of those colors down, that dark. So put this heavier layer up here. And then I'm going to come here and just try to soften that edge. Okay. How does that look? It looks good on my end. I'm not sure how it looks on camera. Yeah. I actually quite like, see how we did that purple and then I put that darker blue just over top of it just now. I think that works really nice, actually. I like how that looks. It makes me wonder if I want to do any more of that elsewhere. If I did do it, probably this would be the place. Okay. Where else? Anything else need this darker color? Can I live with stuff down here? I think so. Some stuff needs to go a bit darker. Could go darker. I think what I'm going to do now, actually, is use some darker greens, and maybe we'll be pretty close to being done. Like, I mean, I could work on this for quite a while. Oh, you know what I do want to do? So there's a bit of more white up here. You know what? I think I want to actually, before I go to the darker green, I'm going to go to an even darker blue. Yeah. Because I'm going to finish it off with that darker green, and then so I think we're... So how about let's mix a much darker color. Let's take our cool, or warm blue, cool blue. Take a bit of cool red. Unless we haven't used any of this cool yellow, so I'm going to put that in there. We're going to get a much darker color. Now it's a lot of that. It's kind of a dark green at the moment. Let's put a little more blue, a little more red. Blue, oops. Right, I'm just mixing a bunch of the different colors together. We're getting a really dark color. Now, obviously, there was white here before, so it's not going to go super dark. If I didn't have white on my brush and I wasn't mixing it, this would be about as close to a black as I could get. But I'm going to use this color to add the kind of the deepest shadows I want to go. There's nothing really dark in this painting, so that's why I don't want to use like just a pure black or a pure dark color, because it would just be too much. So, but I am going to blow dry this and because we have a lot of wet paint on here at the moment. Okay, so got a bunch of wet brushes here, so let me just 1 second, I clean up a little bit. So this darker color I'm going to apply in here. I know that this area is actually technically darker than what I'm about to put. I'm just because of time here, but that's one of the things. I probably could have darkened some of this in a little bit more under here and here. But, this is a painting by one of the greatest artists of all time, who painted this painting in 1941, which was, she was about, what would have been about 50 years old at the time she made this painting. She died at age 98 in 1986, did I say? So, yeah, she would have been, about around 50, 48, 52, somewhere around that age. So this is, she'd been painting full-time and making the painting she made for about 25 years before she made this painting. So she was, she knew what she was doing when she made this painting, for sure. Whereas we're all still trying to, looking at it, trying to figure out how she did this incredible artwork. Okay, so I've got this dark color I mixed. Now, I don't think I'm going to apply it anywhere as it is, so I'm going to just dilute it a little. In fact, actually, let's put some slow dry medium in here. So you can see I put a bunch in there. I'm not going to use all of it and mix it all up, but this will, I can almost use the slow dry medium to dilute it, again, using it like a glaze. Okay. So where did I say? Let's put these. Right, well, there's a lot of slow dry means. Okay. Well, you know what? Actually, this works pretty well in here. You know, a big part of this painting is also subtlety, right? Like, as I said, there's very little really, really bright or dark colors or shades in here. So, to soften this up, I'm just going to blend that out into the white a bit. And then we'll just darken the darker part more. I went a little too much there, but yeah, let's just keep on moving, Michael. Stop obsessing about those little things that are totally unimportant. Do I want to do that? Yikes, let's see, there we go. over blended that area there. And the more and more I'm looking at this painting, the more I kind of start really appreciating aspects of it and how she did this painting. Like there's, yeah, man, there's some absolutely gorgeous stuff going on in here. Do I want to darken under here or not? 'Tis the question. I don't know. I don't. I'm leaning towards not, but I could. Okay, just very subtle little wisps under here. I think I'm going to turn these into some shadow wisps. Shadow wisps. Okay, let's blend a bunch of this here. Again, this is not what she did, but I'm just going to put this there. Okay. Because, you know, I say it all the time, but, you know, your painting has to live on its own. And there comes a time where even, you know, when we're painting a painting based on somebody else's art, that you have to make that decision is like, do I want to, like, if this painting wants to go in a different direction, what do I do here? Do I keep trying to force it to do what I want it to do, or can I just at some point go, you know what? It wants its own to go its own way. I'm just gonna follow it and let it tell me what to do. So that's what I'm doing in a few places here, where I just saying, you know what? I feel like I want it to be darker right here, and that's not really, or hers is a little bit darker, but not in the way that I've sort of built up my own painting. And maybe if I had a lot more time, I could try to pull it back towards her painting, but I'm not sure how I feel about that. I'm going to have to touch that up with, I think, a little bit of white after that dries, but let's come back. Yeah, I definitely feel like this needs to be darker now. But how many of these little wisps am I going to make darker? Can I live with something like this? that's kind of something I think about, when I'm painting, is like, can I live with it? Like, can I, if I leave it like this, is this going to be okay, or am I, every time I look at the painting, is it going to be like, oh, that part just drove me nuts, I wish I had done blah 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 blah. Like, so looking at the painting now, I'm going to start kind of wrapping up here. We'll go into the green in a second. That does seem a little bit lonely, doesn't it? That dark line there. Maybe this needs to subsequently be darker under here. That really need to be darker. Okay, so, or do I want that to be darker? I think I do. The other thing too to remember is she came, like, her original paintings were, the first paintings she was making were all these abstract paintings, and so she's painting realistic. She started painting realistic things, and little areas, like, for instance, what I'm just doing right here. She may have, painted the flower, and it looked exactly like the flower, and she was happy with it. But then she would sit there and probably go, like, I painted it exactly the way it looks, but exact isn't working. It needs something, maybe a darker color here or a highlight here, which aren't in fact there, but it requires, the painting itself requires it in order to be complete, right? So that's, if that's the thing, like, if you're painting from a photograph, or in this case from another painting, the tendency is to, like, really, really want it to be exactly like the original. But that can be like a prison where if you don't allow a little bit of flexibility, then you can find yourself just, like, obsessing endlessly over parts that are really trivial and aren't changing. The people, when they see it, don't think anything of it, but all you do is see that one little problem or issue that needs to be quote unquote fixed. But isn't that just like life anyway, right? You think about, we've all got our own kind of issues and things, and then you tell a friend And they're like, yeah, so what? I don't know, what's the big deal? No, you don't understand. And they're like, you know, I guess that's a problem. Sure. Okay. So the final things I'm going to do here is just add a little bit of darker green into here, and then I'm going to be done. The painting has certainly deviated from the original, but it doesn't bother me. I mean, but that's probably not news to any of you. Okay, I'm just cleaning a few brushes before I transition to my last color here. So this, my mop brush, my blending brush is like soaking wet. I mean, obviously because I just got it out of the water, but its effect at this point is probably, you know, is debatable. So that's why it's nice to have a few of them, so that while one's drying, and you can use a different one. Okay. So to get this darker. To get this green, we can use the same colors we had before. So we have this cold yellow, we have the cold blue or cool blue. Alright, so we can mix that. You know, let's just try going like with this pretty dark color, right? Like we kind of modified it a little bit and made it quite thin with the slow dry medium. If we just put a little bit less slow dry medium in there, I think it's going to be pretty good for a darker color. If we want, we can always add our dark color to it as well, and that will help. But let's just see how this works on its own right now. Yeah, I think I will add a little bit more dark in a minute, but I think this is working pretty good so far. So, because not everything needs to be really, really dark, right? See how I'm just sort of like blending it out with the paint on my brush, just as it is, right? Not even really, haven't used my blending brush at all, just painting and then kind of just very lightly, like as I'm doing this, my hand kind of comes off the canvas a little bit so that I'm just gliding over the top of the surface barely. This is it's kind of like a dry brush technique, really. There's less and less paint on my brush. And let's just soften this. Oh, that didn't work very well. So this is going to get much darker right in around here in a few minutes. You know, if you feel like some of these colors that we've just been adding, this dark color is just too blue or whatever, I can kind of take my brush here and go into some of these darker areas and just lightly touch them up and add a little bit more green back into there. It's pretty subtle. Okay, and I think, remember I said this was a little bit lonely, this dark line here, so I'm going to go in here and give it a little bit of company with a little bit more green. As things are getting darker and darker, there might be places where you feel like, well, now this needs to get darker too, right? Which is not unusual. It feels kind of nice, just bringing a bit of green into some of those darker places. Very, very subtle. Again, this is not what she did, but that's what my painting is asking me to do, so I shall obey you, painting. Okay, so we're gonna, I think we're pretty getting close here. So I'm just gonna add a little bit of this here. So you see, I haven't really been doing much blending with the blending tool. I'm just very carefully kind of adding color and kind of massaging it a little bit here and there, but otherwise everything is, I just basically have a very dry brush with a little bit of paint on it and just blending those colors around. Cool. It makes me even think, yeah, well, you know, okay, so let's, I should stop thinking and just paint. Okay, so let's take some of this darker color that we've got here. right? Remember we just mixed that 10 minutes ago or so. So I'm going to mix this into the green. I can just use my brush, the paint that's already on my brush in this corner here. And this is going to be now for some final little details in the very center of the painting, perhaps in the bottom right corner too. So I'm going to go to a much smaller brush for some of these fine details. And maybe let's zoom in here. It kind of makes my painting look kind of silly compared to hers when